I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, October the 26th, brought to you in part by Macrocin by Bimeda. Macrocin is a bold, straight shooting tulathromycin injection that does what it's supposed to do for you, for your cattle, and most importantly for your bottom line. For more information, go to macrocin.com. Can't bet on the home team. I've talked here in recent days with the collapse of the cattle futures that there's just nobody on the long side, and your funds and your speculators have decided that it's a lot safer to put money in higher interest things that aren't as volatile as what your commodities are, and we can't blame them for that. But there's just nobody at all in the industry that's on the long side of the futures. Everybody's on the short side, and I noticed that I had several comments on some of my reports saying, you know, that they found that unusual that there's nobody within the industry that's on the long side of the board. The heck of it is, your lenders will not allow producers, cattle feeders, and the like to take long positions on the cattle futures. That is not something that they see as something that they should be doing, and they will not allow it. In fact, I've heard of some lenders that have completely cut cattle feeders, cattle producers off if they found out that they took long positions on the cattle futures. So we're totally dependent. Like I said, we're totally dependent on speculators, on fund managers, and the like to take long positions on the futures market, because we have to have a long position for every short position to offset each other and hold the market up. But with no long positions being held, we're heavily on the short side, and it's just an anchor on the market. As good as our fundamentals are, it's just an anchor on the market. It's just bogging things down all the time. But when you can't bet on your own team, it's kind of like Division I college or NFL football. You can't place a bet at all. If you place a bet, you're suspended. You can no longer play football if you want to bet on football. And it just goes to show you that football is completely for the NCAA or the NFL for their TV contracts and for their Las Vegas gambling. But they don't want anybody within the players to take positions one way or the other. It doesn't matter. Even if you're on the home team, you're not to be taking any kind of bets. And your cattle trading is pretty much the same way. Your cattle is completely for your fund managers, for your corporates, for your packers, and those kind of people to play. Those that are actually involved in the playing are not allowed to be taking positions, especially on the home team, on the long side. They're to be doing that. Now, you can take short hedges to protect your investment, but that's pretty much all. But you look at the short term still looks pretty good. Even with the collapse of the board, short term looks good. Nobody's keeping heifers back for the most part. We're not rebuilding our herd. We're continuing to sell off, and people need money. They need to sell those heifers because they haven't been making a lot of money over the last several years, so they've got to sell those heifers to get money to feed their family, to continue to improve their operations and make investment in your operations. And that's on the short term, and probably for the next several decades we're probably all right, because whenever we do build back, we're not going to be building back as big as we did before. We've got conservation, we've got hunting reserves, we've got urban sprawl, we've got all those things that are taking so much of this of land out of production, so that when we build back, we're not going to be building back as big as we did before, and it will probably keep those that are involved in cattle production at least profitable enough to keep going. But for the long term, your packers continue to roll and control this operation. Recently, we've seen JBS, your farmer's friend, heavily invest in a $62 million plant in Brazil to research, develop, and produce cell-cultured fake meat. Why would they be doing that? Because they see the handwriting on the wall that people like beef, even pork, and all your big home-raised and barnyard produced proteins. But in the long term, as our populations continue to increase, probably not going to be enough to satisfy all those appetites. So they've gone to alternative proteins. Recently, we've seen Tyson heavily invest in an alternative protein that's going to include insects as a protein, as opposed to beef or pork or something like that. So, you know, this is a relatively short term in the whole scheme of things that we're going to be able to do that. And perhaps maybe as people like to have beef, and I've told you that I'm fearful that eventually that beef is just going to be, you know, something fancy that we only get once in a while. And it could be that. And as populations increase and our production decreases, you know, a lot of our cattle producers may be able to stay in the business just producing that product that is just for the rich and famous, or for those that are out for once in a while big spending spree there to enjoy that type of a product. But in the long term, it's definitely going to dwindle down. Let's talk about your board. On Wednesday, October live cattle futures up $1.12. It's starting to kind of come back towards cash because we've talked about that. Cash cannot completely fall out of bed as fast as they can in the futures market. So it's got to come back at least on your spot contracts so that those will kind of work. But up $1.12 at 180, 112. December's up 80 cents at 179.42. Your back months were all up from 32 cents to 65 cents. October feeder cattle up 55 cents at 239.97. November up 262 at 238.05. And your back months on feeder cattle up 117 to up 170. So that complete collapse of your cattle futures, that's just not realistic. We have to come back a little bit, guys. But you talk about your December corn down 4 cents at 4.80. It's kind of settled back there under $5 a bushel, and we feel like that's kind of where it belongs. And November beans down 7 cents at 12.88 and a quarter cent a bushel. Kansas City hard red winter wheat for December down 14 at 6.49. Your fat cattle trade kind of continued, and we haven't really seen a whole lot of negotiated trade in your 5 area fat cattle arena there. We feel like there was a lot of cattle that were probably forward contracted around that 185 level on a Monday, with the big basis there for your cattle feeders there to try to achieve better profits right in there. But we haven't seen a lot of spot negotiated cash trade take place this week. Iowa sold 1,600 on Wednesday, 16,500 head for the week, and they're the biggest of the 5 areas by far. But live sales on Wednesday were 183, and dress sales at 290, which the 290 is not that much lower, maybe $4 lower at the top end. And about the same on your live sales, 183. We saw some 186, 187 last week, so that may be $3-4 lower also. Nebraska sold 5,400 on Wednesday, 7,000 for the week. Live sales in Nebraska on Wednesday were 182 to 183. Dress sales from 288 to largely 290. We still haven't seen any to speak of trade out of Kansas or Texas on a negotiated cash basis this week, and it's going to be interesting to see where we were at. The last we saw in the Southern Plains was 185, but we did see a brick and mortar sale that sold fat cattle On Wednesday, it was Sioux Falls Regional Livestock in Worthing, South Dakota. They called it mostly steady, instances $1 to $2 lower. Your conventional fat cattle sold from 178 to 184 and a quarter. Some of the program non-implanted and drug-free cattle selling from 180 to 186. But your box beef cutout values were mixed on Wednesday. Choice cuts up $1.50 at $307.50. Selects down $2.34 at $281.66. Your slaughter running about par to last week, but far below a year ago. 377,000 estimated harvest through the first 3 days of this week. That is exactly the same as last week up till now, but 8,000 less than the same week a year ago. Talk about your Punchy Pick of the Month contest. Guys, we've been having a lot of fun with this, and we're getting a lot of Punchy Picks coming in this month. But if you're interested in putting your Punchy Pick in, better get in here, because we're getting down towards the end of the month, the last day of the month. We're going to award the grand prize, which is some cool swag from Beaver Feed Company in Beaver, Oklahoma. Some more cool stuff from Beaver County Stockyards in Beaver, Oklahoma. And then that whole case of Fairpiece, which we talk about all the time. It's that revolutionary product. If you haven't tried it, you need to try it. It has to do with the pheromones in the cattle, just a topical product that you put over their poll and over their muzzle. It tends to calm the cattle down, especially when they're fresh or short-weaned or new purchases, something like that. If they're going through a lot of stress, it'll calm the cattle down. Stay tuned after the feeder flash, and then I'll show you another video about Fairpiece. But talk about what else is going on. Livestock Risk Services, that's Dakota Moss there in Oklahoma City at the Oklahoma National Stockyards. They're your LRP specialists, him and his agents that work with him there. But they sell other products too. Don't forget, on top of the LRPs, they also specialize in pasture range and forage, lack of rainfall coverage, guys. So if you're interested in something like that, get a hold of them at livestockriskservices.com. Talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DVAuction late in the day on Wednesday sets at 234.65, down 297. Of course, it's been down hard every day this week after the collapse of your cattle futures, partly due to cattle on feed report, probably partly due to the economy, and probably partly due to the war that's going on over in the Middle East. But fell big time on Wednesday, and it's a 7-day moving average. So the first day we saw a little, with the big drop, we saw it come off a little bit. The next day a little more, and then on Wednesday a lot more. But it's coming down in a big way. Talk about your big sales on Wednesday. OKC West in El Reno, Oklahoma, they had 3,900 is all. A lot of producers just decided they didn't want to be involved in this first sale after the big collapse, and you can't blame them for that. But receipts were light there at OKC West, just 3,900 head. But the feeders sold $5 to $12 lower. Calves similarly $5 to $12 lower than last week, and that's to be expected, and may not be off as much as what some of your big sales were earlier in the week. Bassett Livestock Auction, Bassett, Nebraska, that's a premium sale. 3,400 for them, and that's likely lighter receipts also. They had few comparisons this week compared to the last sale. But your NationalBeefWire stick-out sale of the day was Bassett Livestock Auction, and you look at your quotes from Cattle Market Central, your automated marker report there, and you see your best tested weights there. 688 head of 5-weight steers in Bassett, average 543 at 302.28. 428 head of 6-weight steers in Bassett, average 633, the weighted average price of $275.81. The heifers were kind of mixed up, but 380 head of your 4-weight heifers, average 452 at $289.26. And then we had bigger heifers, producers that sold their steers earlier in the year and now coming back with their heifers because not many of them are keeping them back. 359 head of 8-weight heifers averaged 858 at 237.45, and 245 head of 9-weight heifers in Bassett, Nebraska averaged 949 with a weighted average price of 229.04. Give you some individual quotes from around. How about Tri-County Stockyards in Motley, Minnesota? They're a DVAuction broadcaster there. They sold 57 steers, weighed 914 pounds at 237.25, way up there in Minnesota. Bassett Livestock Auction had another stick-out sale there. It was 104 fancy steer calves, weighed 525 at 324, and that's about all they'll bring right now, guys. But the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere on Wednesday, your Macrocin, no BS, top quote for the day, come out of Stockman's Livestock Market in Yankton, South Dakota. The Wednesday feeder sale, I know we talk about their fat sale on Tuesdays, but they have a hell of a feeder sale on Wednesdays, and they sold 50 steers, weighed 820 pounds, bring 250. And that's your feeder flash for Thursday.
My biggest account is Jeff Slatton, the owner of Beaver County Stockyards. For a while, we was selling him lots of antibiotics to doctor his cattle with. He was having basically a wreck at times. Therapies comes along, we introduce it, he starts trying it out. Almost instantly, his vet bill reduced drastically, and the only thing that was changed up was therapies. I've also had other guys, cow-calf guys, this previous fall that tried it. Had one individual out here east of Beaver. First time he's ever tried it. He said he's always weaned his calves. They've bawled. They're right around his house. Can't sleep. This is the first year he's used it. He sent me a video one afternoon. The calves are all at the bunk. They're eating. They're spread out doing what they're supposed to do, and not a sound. So he was sold on it instantly. I've had several other reports of that. Lots of people saying that their cattle they act different. They're calmer, they handle easier, they're at the bunk, they're drinking. If your cattle are doing that, they're gaining, they're doing what they're supposed to do.